I learned too late that doing nothing can still be a choice, and that it can kill just as surely as pulling a trigger. I'm writing this because the nights are longer now, and because time is running out in a way it never did when I was young. There's a decision I made in the summer of 1944 that I've carried quietly for the better part of a lifetime. I've never put it on paper, not even for my wife, especially not for her. It was raining when it happened. Not the hard kind that clears the air, but a thin, steady drizzle that soaks into wool and stays there. We were lying in a hedgerow outside a Norman village whose name I won't write down. The earth smelled green and rotten at the same time. Somewhere to our left, an engine coughed and died. Somewhere ahead, a single rifle cracked, then nothing. That kind of quiet always meant trouble. I checked my watch for no good reason. It was a cheap thing with a scratched face, bought before I shipped out. The second hand had a habit of sticking for a moment before it moved again. It was just past dawn. I remember thinking the day felt older than it was. My name doesn't matter. I was an infantryman, 29th Division. Like thousands of others who landed, and then pushed inland through fields that looked peaceful until they weren't. We'd been in France long enough to stop counting days and start counting men. By then, the unit had thinned out and thickened again with replacements who didn't know our jokes and didn't last long enough to learn them. Tommy lay beside me, his chin pressed into the mud, helmet tilted too far back. He had freckles that never faded, even after months in the sun. Back home in Indiana, he'd worked at his father's garage. He could fix anything with an engine and had the calmest hands I'd ever seen. When he was nervous, he tapped the cigarette tin he carried, even when it was empty. He was tapping it now. "Listen," he whispered. I listened. I heard water dripping off leaves. I heard my own breathing, louder than it ought to have been. Then I heard it, the low murmur of voices, German, close enough that I could catch the rhythm if not the words. Our lieutenant had given the order an hour earlier. "Hold, bearings. Do not advance until the platoon on our right moved up. No firing unless fired upon." It was a reasonable order. They usually are. I'd followed reasonable orders my whole adult life by then. We weren't supposed to be where we were. A wrong turn in the dark, a fence cut where it shouldn't have been. Now we were tucked into a hedgerow that belonged to the enemy as much as to us. If they found us first, we wouldn't have much say in how it ended. Tommy leaned closer. "If they come through here," he said, "we won't have time." I nodded. I checked my watch again. The second hand hesitated, then moved. That's when I saw the boy. He was no more than 16, maybe younger, wearing a civilian coat too big for him, boots slick with mud. He stood on the other side of the hedge, not 10 yards away, staring at the ground like he'd lost something. A folded paper stuck out of his pocket. He smelled of wet wool and fear. He looked up and our eyes met through the leaves. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He just stood there, breathing hard, as if waiting for permission. There's a detail I've never told anyone, not even my wife. The boy's eyes went to my watch. I don't know why. Maybe the metal caught the light. Maybe I imagined it. But in that moment, with the drizzle and the voices and Tommy's tin tapping in my ear, I understood that whatever I did next would not stay in that hedgerow. I thought about the order. I thought about survival. I thought about how easy it is to explain later why you did nothing. The boy opened his mouth. That's where I'll stop for now, because what happened next is the part I still argue with myself about, even all these years later. The boots stopped at the edge of the ditch. Rain had returned, soft now, just enough to soak through collars and make the mud sticky. I watched the boy through the tall grass. His coat was torn, one sleeve hanging, and he tried to pull himself up. The Germans were there in seconds, hands on rifles, eyes hard, scanning the edges. Tommy leaned toward me. "Woo. Can't just... He started, but I shook my head. The lieutenant's orders echoed in my skull. Stop anyone suspicious. Check papers. Do not interfere unless fired upon. The rules were supposed to be clear. They never feel that way when a boy is staring at you, waiting. One of the Germans grabbed the boy under the arm. He wrenched him up, shook him slightly, and the boy's head lolled to the side, wet hair plastered to his cheek. Then something in the boy's eyes met mine. Not pleading, not accusing, just questioning, quiet, dilksung, steady. I remember thinking that this was the exact moment my inaction would etch itself into a lifetime of what-ifs. I stayed down, rifle ready but unmoving. Tommy's hand brushed mine. Light, almost a question. I couldn't answer him. I couldn't even answer myself. The Germans moved the boy away. A tug on his arm here. A command there. Voices clipped and sharp. He glanced back once, and I swear he recognized me as the one who had the power to step forward or step aside. After they disappeared around the bend, the quiet pressed down. My rifle felt heavy. My watch, resting against my chest, ticked like a pulse I could feel. I wanted to say something to Tommy, some explanation, a justification, but words had gone limp. We continued along the road. The resistance liaison met us near the orchard, a wiry man with eyes that had seen too much. He accepted the folded paper from Hargreave without comment, nodding once. I caught the boy's name whispered in French from the liaison to someone else. It sounded familiar, too familiar. That evening we camped in a ruined farmhouse. Fire flickered in the hearth, smoke thick enough to choke. Tommy cleaned his rifle, tapping the cigarette tin, though the tin was empty. He spoke little. I lay awake on a pile of hay, thinking about the boy, thinking about how quickly we become spectators in other people's lives, while believing we're still the actors. Hours later, I heard a knock at the door. A local woman, her eyes wide and wary, stepped in. She held a basket of food. No words at first, just eyes that seemed to ask whether we had hearts beneath our uniforms. I remembered the boy. I remembered the folded paper. The woman didn't know anything. Probably. Yet somehow she held a mirror to the choice I'd already made. I could have acted. I could have intervened. But I didn't. The weight of that reality pressed down with each breath. Tommy tapped the cigarette tin once, lightly. You ever feel like this war isn't about men at all? He asked quietly. I shook my head. I couldn't answer. The boy's face, drenched in questioning, kept flashing behind my eyes. I felt the tension coil in my gut, tightening. That single moment, the hesitation, the choice, the watch ticking quietly on my wrist, had set a series of events into motion that I couldn't undo. I slept poorly. Dreams came in fragments. The boy running across the ditch, the German's hands, my own rifle raised and useless. The tin clinked in my mind, rhythmic, taunting. And when dawn broke, it wasn't just light that arrived. It was another decision, one I would face with trembling certainty. The consequences of doing nothing had begun to reach beyond me, beyond Tommy, beyond even the confines of the Hedgerow. I didn't understand what that choice would cost until weeks later, and I still don't. The boy didn't speak. He swallowed, then closed his mouth again, like he'd changed his mind about asking for something. The drizzle darkened his hair until it lay flat against his head. I could see a faint cut on his cheek, already pink from the cold. Behind him, the German voices drew closer. Boots on mud. I'd do... A low laugh. Someone clearing his throat. Tommy shifted beside me. The cigarette tin stopped tapping. If he yells, Tommy whispered, not finishing the sentence. I raised my rifle without quite meaning to. The barrel trembled just enough that I noticed it. I remember being irritated by that, as if it were a personal failing. The lieutenant's voice came back to me, calm and clipped. Hold. Hold. No firing unless fired upon. The boy's eyes flicked past me, then back. He knew. However much he understood, he knew enough. I could have spoken. I could have waved him away. I could have stood up and taken my chances. Instead, I stayed still. That's the part that sounds harmless when you say it fast. The hedge rustled as two German soldiers appeared, rifles slung, collars turned up against the rain. They were older than the boy. Not old men, but not young either. One of them saw him and said something sharp. The boy flinched. I checked my watch again. The second hand stuck. My heart seemed to follow it, pausing with it before moving on. One of the Germans grabbed the boy's sleeve and spun him around. They spoke to him quickly. He shook his head, then nodded, then shook it again. His gaze went to the hedge one last time, not straight at me now, but close enough that I felt it like a hand on my chest. Tommy leaned in. "We can't," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement meant to hold us both in place. I nodded, because nodding is easier than deciding. The Germans searched the boy. They took the folded paper from his pocket. One of them read it, frowned, and stuffed it into his own coat. The boy said something then, his voice thin, almost lost to the rain. The soldier answered with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. They didn't see us, or maybe they did, and decided not to see. I've turned that over in my mind more times than I can count. In any case, they led the boy away down the lane. Boots splashing, voices fading. When they were gone, the quiet came back heavier than before. Tommy exhaled. The cigarette tin tapped once, then stopped. "That was close," he said. I wanted to agree. I wanted to say something ordinary that would put a lid on it. Instead, I said nothing. My throat felt tight, as if I'd swallowed something wrong. An hour passed, then another. The platoon on our right never moved. Eventually, orders changed, as they always do. We pulled back before noon, slipping away through the hedges the way we'd come. No one mentioned the boy. That afternoon, we took fire crossing an open field. It wasn't heavy, but it was enough. A replacement from Ohio went down with a shout that cut off too soon. The medics worked on him behind a stone wall while the rest of us waited, useless, counting shots. I checked my watch. The second hand moved smoothly now, as if it had decided to behave. That night, we bivouacked in a ruined barn. Rain drummed on the roof. Someone snored. Someone else prayed quietly. Tommy cleaned his rifle with care, then took out the cigarette tin and flipped it open and shut, open and shut. "You think," he said finally, not looking at me, "Hell'll be all right?" I didn't answer. I was thinking about the folded paper, about the way the boy had stood there as if waiting for permission. I told myself we'd had no choice. I told myself orders mattered. I told myself survival wasn't a crime. Weeks later, I would learn what that paper was, and why the boy had been carrying it. I would understand then that the moment in the hedgerow hadn't ended when we pulled back. But that night, in the barn, with the rain and the smell of oil and hay, all I knew was that something had been set in motion, and that I had helped it along by staying still. Dawn came slow that morning, gray and wet. The kind of light that makes everything look smaller than it is. We moved out before breakfast, packs heavier with mud, rifles sticky with dew. The road ahead curved through low hills and orchards. Birds called somewhere unseen, as if mocking the quiet tension in our unit. Tommy kept close, his hand brushing mine when the path narrowed. The cigarette tin was in his pocket, tapped occasionally, lightly, an anchor, a rhythm in the fog of unease. I tried not to think about it, tried to focus on the march, on the orders. Secure the road, Screen for partisans, follow instructions. But my mind kept returning to the boy. We reached the bend near the old mill, where we'd been told resistance activity might flare. The road narrowed and the hedgerows closed in. I kept my watch face up, second hand moving steadily, as if counting down something I wasn't ready to face. Then we heard it, a sudden crack of rifle fire, sharp and close, followed by the echo of men shouting in French and German. Dust and smoke rose along the far hedge. Tommy and I hit the ground. My stomach turned. From the edge of the field, the boy emerged, limping, coat torn, one sleeve hanging. He ran, clutching something under his arm. The Germans behind him fired, but we weren't supposed to interfere. My hands ached on the rifle. I could feel Tommy trembling beside me. "Do something," he hissed. I couldn't. Orders. Geesh. Survival. Dotty. Fear. War. Fear. I froze. I watched him stagger into the open, a slip of a boy caught between bullets and silenced. The folded paper, or whatever he carried now, was gone from sight. He made it to the ditch, tumbled down, and then froze. The Germans converged. They didn't seem to notice us at first, until one of them glanced sideways, frowning. The boy's head tilted, and for a fleeting second, our eyes met again. There was no accusation, no relief. Just a question, quietly impossible to answer. The soldiers dragged him up, booted him along the edge of the ditch, voices sharp. My fingers itched to fire, to move, to do anything, but I stayed. Tommy's hand brushed mine again. He was whispering, "I can't believe this." I nodded, because there was nothing else to do. After they disappeared, the silence returned. The smell of wet earth and smoke clung to the air. We followed orders, advancing cautiously, keeping to the hedgerow, hearts tight. At the next village, we handed the report and the brief intelligence to the resistance liaison. He took it without a word, eyes flicking over the papers as if weighing them against the lives of men he'd never met. That night, we camped in a half-ruined farmhouse. I sat on a pile of hay, thinking about the boy, the paper, and the choices that I'd made, or refused to make. Tommy lay nearby, cigarette tin in hand, tapping lightly. He didn't speak. I didn't speak. The shadows moved across the walls, heavy and slow. I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the beams, every distant shout, every drip of water from the roof reminded me of the boy's eyes. I kept thinking about what it would have meant to step forward, to act, to make a choice. I kept thinking about what I did instead. By morning, the decision waiting for me had grown. I knew it. Something had started in that hedgerow, in that moment when I didn't move, and it was spreading beyond my control, beyond even the people I loved. I couldn't undo it, and yet it demanded an answer. The question I'd been avoiding was about to arrive. We moved again before dawn, boots squelching, packs heavier with damp. The rain had eased into a gray mist that clung low to the fields. Cows watched us from behind wire fences, their breath puffing white. War had a way of borrowing peaceful things and leaving them changed. I kept checking my watch. I told myself it was habit, a weighty cold of time when days blurred together. The second hand didn't stick that morning. It moved cleanly, almost cheerful. I hated it for that. Our new position overlooked a narrow road that curved between apple trees. Somewhere beyond it was the village we'd missed the day before. The lieutenant, Captain Hargreave, West Point type, clean voice even when shells were falling, knelt with the map spread over his knee. "We're to screen this road," he said. "Refugees have been using it. Could be enemy in among them. We let civilians pass, but we stop anyone suspicious. Papers checked. No heroics. No heroics." That phrase again. It sounded like permission and warning all at once. Tommy gave me a look I couldn't read. He tapped the cigarette tin twice, then tucked it away. Late morning, they started coming. Old men with carts, women pushing bicycles, a girl carrying a baby too big for her arms. They moved slowly, eyes down, as if the road itself were to blame for what had happened to them. We waved them through, awkward and careful, rifles pointed at nothing in particular. Then a truck appeared at the bend, canvas sides flapping. It slowed when it saw us. The engine coughed, the same sound I'd heard the day before. My stomach tightened. 2 German soldiers rode in front. In back, under the canvas, shapes shifted. "That," Hargreaves said quietly. We stepped out, rifles raised. The truck stopped. The Germans climbed down, hands up, faces tight with calculation. They spoke fast, overlapping. Hargreave answered in his schoolbook German, stiff but understandable. He ordered the canvas pulled back. Inside were 4 boys and 2 older men, hands bound, civilian coats, muddy boots. One of the boys lifted his head. It was him. The cut on his cheek had darkened. His eyes were swollen from crying or lack of sleep. He looked past the rifles and found my face as if he'd been searching for it. For a second, neither of us moved. My watch felt heavy on my wrist. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. The Germans talked over each other now, gesturing, insisting. Hargreave listened, jaw set. He turned to us. "They say these are partisans," he said. "Caught carrying messages." My mouth went dry. I thought of the folded paper. I thought of the boy's mouth opening in the rain, and then closing again. "Captain," Tommy said, and stopped. The cigarette tin was in his hand without him realizing it. Hargreave looked at him. "Yes." Tommy swallowed. "Sir, maybe we should—" A shot cracked from somewhere down the road. Not aimed at us, not close, but close enough to make everyone flinch. The Germans tensed. One of the bound men shouted something. The boy squeezed his eyes shut. "Enough," Hargreave snapped. He turned back to the Germans. There was more talking, sharper now. Finally, a nod. Hargreave faced us. "We're turning them over to the resistance liaison in the village," he said. "They'll sort it out." Sort it out. Another phrase that sounds clean until you live with it. As the truck rolled forward again, slower now, the boy twisted to look back. His eyes met mine once more. There was no accusation in them. That's what I can't forget. Just a question, quiet and steady. Tommy stepped closer to me. "Say something," he murmured. "You should say something." I opened my mouth. I felt the words line up, sensible and careful. Then I thought about the order. I thought about the shot down the road. I thought about how quickly things turn when you push against them. The truck disappeared around the bend. That afternoon, we advanced into the village. There was a skirmish near the church. Smoke hung low. A house burned at the edge of the square, apples popping in the heat where a cart had overturned. We took 2 prisoners. One of them had the folded paper in his pocket, creased and stained. I didn't read it then. I couldn't. I put it away, telling myself I'd look later, when things were calmer. That night, Tommy didn't tap the cigarette tin at all. He lay staring at the dark, breathing slow and shallow. "You know," he said after a long while, "sometimes doing nothing feels like hiding." I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to tell myself the same thing. Instead, I listened to the distant guns and waited for sleep that didn't come, knowing the paper in my pocket would change something once I unfolded it, and knowing that whatever it said, I was already too late to answer the question in the boy's eyes. We moved out again before first light. The village behind us was quiet, smoke rising from the few burned-out cottages, birds calling as though nothing had happened. The road ahead cut through orchards, low hedgerows, and abandoned fields. Mud clung to boots, and the air smelled of wet earth and something like ash. Tommy was beside me, cigarette tin in hand, tapping lightly. He hadn't said much since the boy was taken. His eyes kept drifting to the horizon, as if expecting to see the past catching up with us. I kept checking my watch, though I knew the second hand's movement wouldn't change what had been set in motion. We rounded a bend near the old mill and stopped. Ahead, smoke rose. Not from fire, but from gunfire. Rifle flashes and the low thud of heavier weapons. Partisans, or maybe Germans, were engaged in a skirmish. Chaos spread quickly in patches, like spilled ink. "Stay low," Hargreave whispered. He had a hand on my shoulder, calm but tense. "We're here to screen, not to join. Watch the civilians, watch the roads." I swallowed, keeping my rifle ready, but my mind was back with the boy. He had been small, trembling, uncertain, yet somehow carrying something that could change everything. I thought of the folded paper, the way he'd looked at me through the rain, waiting for permission I never gave. And then I saw him, limping across the road, his coat torn, face pale. He carried something tucked under his arm. The Germans behind him fired, but he kept moving. My hands ached to act. Tommy's hand brushed mine. "Shoot," he whispered. Not meaning it, just saying the only word that could fill the silence. I didn't. I stayed down. My mind screamed with orders, survival, reason, but my body was frozen. The boy reached the ditch, tumbled, and froze. Boots approached. Shouts followed. I watched them drag him away. Our eyes met one last time. No accusation, no plea, only that impossible, quiet question. After they disappeared, we continued cautiously. The resistance liaison took the intelligence Hargreave handed over. I watched his eyes flick over the paper, knowing he would act. I also knew that I could never be sure what happened after. That night, in a ruined farmhouse, the fire flickered against the walls. Tommy sat beside me, tapping the tin, finally breaking the silence. "You did what you could," he said softly, but his voice lacked certainty. "I don't know if I did enough," I said. Weeks later, I learned the full consequence. The paper hadn't just been information. It had been a warning, a map of movements, of lives depending on a single decision. And the boy? He had survived, just barely. But at a cost I could not have anticipated. I've carried that weight every day since. The watch on my wrist ticks still, a reminder that time moves on. Indifferent. Tommy's tin sits on the shelf, empty, yet somehow full of the memory of hesitation, of fear, of a choice made and unmade. I don't know if anyone would call what I did right or wrong, but I do know this. The boy's eyes haunt me more than the gunfire, more than the dead. The question he asked with that look is one I will carry to the end. Would you have done differently? The truth is, I don't know that I ever could have. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Folded small in my breast pocket. All night, it pressed there like a reminder that breathed when I did. The village settled into a broken kind of quiet. Embers snapping. A dog barking once and then stopping. The church bell cracked but still standing. Just before dawn, I finally took it out. I sat on the floor of a stone shed with my back against the wall, knees drawn up, helmet beside me. The watch lay on my knee, face up. The second hand moved without hesitation. I unfolded the paper carefully, as if it might tear if I rushed it. It was a list, names and times, short notes in a cramped hand, locations marked by landmarks, an orchard, a culvert, the bend in the road by the old mill. At the bottom was a date circled twice. That date was tomorrow. It wasn't orders for an attack, not exactly. It was information, movements, supply trucks, gaps, enough to get men killed if it reached the right hands, and enough to save lives too. depending on who read it first. I folded it back up. Slower this time. Outside, boots scraped. Tommy ducked in, eyes rimmed red, hair stuck down with sweat. He held the cigarette tin but didn't open it. "You read it," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "What is it?" I told him. I didn't dress it up. I didn't soften it. When I finished, he sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the dirt. "So the kid was a courier," he said. "Or trying to be. Looks that way." Tommy ran a thumb along the edge of the tin. "Then they weren't lying." "No," I said. "They weren't." He was quiet for a long moment. "Then, what are you going to do with it?" The right answer would have been easy. Turn it over. Report it. Let the chain take it where it would. The lieutenant had been clear about suspicious civilians. We had orders for this sort of thing, written and unwritten both. "I don't know," I said, and meant it. Later that morning, Hargreave called me over near the church steps. He had the map out again, weighted with a rock. His face looked older in daylight. "We're pushing through by noon," he said. "Resistance says there may be trouble along the road east. Couriers, partisans. We don't need surprises." I felt the paper in my pocket like a pulse. "Sir," I said, and stopped. Hargreave looked up. "Yes, there's a moment sometimes, a narrow one, when a thing can still go either way. You can feel it pass, like a train you don't board." "I found something," I said finally, and held out the folded paper. He took it, scanned it quickly. His jaw tightened. "Where did this come from?" "One of the prisoners," I said. "From yesterday." He nodded once. "Good." He tucked it into his map case. "This may help us avoid a mess." "Or make one," I said before I could stop myself. Hargreaves' eyes met mine. There was no anger there, just a kind of weariness. "That's always the risk," he said. "We'll do our best." After he walked away, Tommy let out a breath he'd been holding. "You did the right thing," he said. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "I don't know," I said. Near noon, we moved out. The road east ran through low ground, hedges thick on both sides. The sky had cleared enough to show blue in places. Birds sang as if nothing had happened here, or would. Halfway along, we heard firing ahead. Short bursts, then a longer rip, unmistakable. We dropped, spread out. Someone shouted for the radio. Someone else cursed. As we edged forward, a figure broke from the hedge on the left and ran across the road. Smaller than a man, too fast. My heart jumped before my mind caught up. "Hold your fire," someone yelled. The figure stumbled, went down, scrambled up again. A face flashed toward us, pale and familiar. The boy. He ran with a limp now, one arm tight to his side. He wasn't carrying anything I could see. Behind him, shots cracked, closer this time. Dirt kicked up at his feet. Tommy was beside me, rifle up, breath quick. "Jesus," he said. "It's him." I checked my watch without meaning to. The second hand moved. It always moved. "Do something," Tommy said, not whispering now. "Do something." The boy reached the far ditch and fell hard, rolling into the weeds. The firing stopped. A shout went up in German. We were close enough now to hear his breathing, ragged and wet. I lay there, rifle steady, orders and reasons lining up like excuses. I told myself we'd already done what we could. I told myself one man couldn't change what was coming. The weeds rustled as boots approached. I still don't know which is worse, that I hesitated, or that I knew exactly why. Years later, I finally learned what that folded paper had meant. The resistance liaison had acted swiftly. The warning it carried allowed them to intercept a supply convoy, prevent an ambush, and saved dozens of lives. The boy, the one I had hesitated to protect, survived the skirmish, though not unscathed. He went on to fight with the resistance until the end of the occupation. I saw his name in a list of survivors in a tattered report decades later. I should have felt relief. I should have felt pride. But all I felt was the weight of what I hadn't done in that hedgerow, the choice to stay still when the world demanded action. The war had a way of giving second chances through the actions of others, while leaving you to carry the first mistakes alone. Tommy died 10 years after the war. He never married. He said once, during a quiet moment in Indiana, "I keep thinking maybe we could done more." I didn't tell him the full story. I didn't tell anyone. That story, the hesitation, the watch, the boy's eyes, is mine alone. I kept the watch for decades. It's scratched, the glass chipped, but it still ticks. Every morning, I wind it. Every night, I lay it beside me. It's a reminder of a moment when time slowed and forced me to make a choice I still struggle to justify. The cigarette tin, long empty, sits on the same shelf. A little echo of Tommy, tapping quietly, reminding me that every small habit, every insignificant object, can hold memory and guilt in equal measure. I think about the boy sometimes. Did he ever know I could have acted differently? Did he ever wonder why I didn't? I imagine him grown, lines in his face where terror once lived, carrying the same questions I do. What would have happened if someone had moved? If someone had cared enough to step forward? I carry those questions with me every day. I write this now because I can no longer carry them silently, because time is running out, and I want someone, somewhere, to understand. War is full of choices. Most are small, most are meaningless in the moment, but some, just a few, leave marks that last a lifetime. The mark of hesitation, the mark of inaction. Would you have done differently? I don't know that I ever could have. And that is the truth I've lived with quietly for over 80 years.